She thought she was just serving another table. But that night at Bellissimo, when Sophia Russo looked into the eyes of Dante Ricci, the man everyone whispered about but no one dared to name, her life changed forever. A simple shift at an Italian restaurant became a descent into a world of power, danger, and forbidden desire. One choice led her from the cold streets of New York to a villa in Tuscany, and into the heart of a man who controlled everything except her. Beneath candlelight and whispered threats, a single kiss would blur the line between protection and possession, between truth and betrayal. Before we begin, if you believe that some stories aren't about falling in love but about surviving it, make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. The icy wind of January bit through my thin coat as I hurried along West 52nd Street, my breath turning to fog in the frigid air. The street lamps glowed dimly against the mist, and every sound, honking cars, footsteps on wet pavement, felt distant. I checked my watch. 5:12 p.m., 10 minutes late. Again, when I pushed open the heavy glass doors of Bellissimo, warmth and the scent of roasted garlic and truffle hit me like a wave. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of wealthy diners, the smooth jazz playing overhead, it all wrapped around me, familiar yet suffocating. "Sophia, where have you been?" Marco's voice snapped through the noise before I even reached the back hallway. The floor manager was red-faced, one hand gripping his clipboard as if it were a lifeline. "There was an accident on Lexington," he cut me off with a shake of his head. "No excuses. You're serving table 7 tonight." My hands froze halfway through tying my apron. "Table 7? That's Jessica's section. Jessica called in sick." His tone softened only slightly, but his eyes darted toward the main dining area, filled with murmuring businessmen and their expensive watches. "And this isn't just any table, Sophia. It's a VIP reservation. Do not mess this up." I swallowed hard, nodding. My rent was already late. Losing this job wasn't an option. "Got it." He leaned closer, voice low. "Just be polite. Smile. Invisible." "Got it. Invisible." The word echoed in my mind like an old habit. I'd been invisible most of my life since leaving Boston, since trying to disappear from a man who wouldn't stop watching me. I grabbed my notepad and walked briskly toward the main dining room, heels tapping against polished marble. The chandeliers overhead cast golden light on the white tablecloths, on the clink of glasses and murmured conversations in accents from all over the world. To the far end, a hallway led to the private dining room, spaces reserved for people whose names weren't listed in any phone book. I'd never been inside one. The sign on the door read, "Private Event." I hesitated for half a second before knocking softly and pushing it open. The room was dimmer than I expected, lit only by warm lamps and a fire crackling in a marble hearth. A single round table dominated the center, surrounded by 6 men in suits so sharply tailored they seemed cut from shadow. Their conversation halted instantly. "Good evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm Sophia, and I'll be your server tonight." The men nodded politely, murmuring greetings, but my eyes caught on the man sitting at the head of the table, or rather, what passed as the head. Even with a round table, there was no mistaking where power. Saturday. He was young. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair combed back neatly. His suit was charcoal, the cut perfect, the tie subtle. But it was his face that caught me, a calm mask hiding something sharp beneath. His gaze was steady, direct, assessing. He didn't look at me the way the others did. He looked through me, as if reading a file written behind my eyes. I lowered my gaze quickly, feeling my pulse quickened as I went around the table, taking orders. "Brunello, Chianti, water with lemon." I could feel his eyes following my movements. When I finally reached him, he hadn't spoken once. I looked up, waiting. He said quietly, "You're new." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," I said, pen poised above my pad. 3 months. A flicker of a smile touched his lips. "Scotch. Neat." I nodded and turned toward the door, grateful for the excuse to leave, when another man in black entered the room and leaned down to whisper something in his ear. The dark-haired man's expression didn't change, but something shifted his posture, the angle of his head. Controlled tension, and I slipped out before anyone noticed, back into the main hallway where laughter and music filled the air again. My heart was still pounding. At the bar, I placed the drink order. The bartender raised an eyebrow. VIP 7? I nodded. He let out a low whistle. Good luck. When I returned with the drinks, the men's voices had dropped lower, their tones serious. I placed the glasses in front of each guest, careful not to interrupt. When I reached the head of the table, I set the scotch gently in front of him. He lifted it, examining the amber liquid like it held a secret. Thank you, he said quietly. His voice was smooth with a faint Italian accent. Of course. I turned to leave. That's when my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. I froze. We weren't allowed to take calls during service. But the number flashing on the screen made my breath catch. Hospice di San Luca. My grandmother's nurse, heart racing. I stepped back toward the wall, lowering my voice as I answered. Pronto. The nurse's voice came through softly in Italian. Sofia, mi dispiace. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. She keeps asking for you. I pressed a hand to my mouth, fighting the sting in my eyes. I'll come as soon as I can. You must hurry, Cara. When I hung up, I realized the room had gone completely silent. Every man at the table was looking at me, but it was his gaze, steady, unreadable, that made the air vanish from my lungs. I am so sorry, I stammered, tucking the phone away. It was a family emergency. No one spoke. The men turned back to their wine, conversation resuming as though nothing had happened. But I could feel him still watching me, measuring me. When I brought their meals later, his eyes followed me again, every step, every motion. As I cleared the plates, he spoke once more, his voice quiet but firm. Family first, Miss Russo. Always. I froze mid-motion. How did you? He didn't answer. Just lifted his glass slightly, almost like a toast, and took a slow sip of scotch. The others laughed at something I didn't hear. But in that instant, I knew that he knew my name, and nothing in my life would ever be simple again. When the last guests left and the dining room fell silent, I stayed behind, stacking plates and folding napkins, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. It was well past midnight, the air thick with the lingering scent of truffle and wine. I told myself that I'd imagined it, that Mr. Ritchie hadn't really known my name, that the moment had been nothing more than coincidence. But when Marco appeared by the bar, holding his clipboard too tightly, I knew something was wrong. Sofia. He wants to see you. I looked up sharply. Who? He gave me a look as if I were being ridiculous. Mr. Ritchie. He's still in his office. Said it won't take long. My stomach dropped. Am I in trouble? Marco shook his head but didn't meet my eyes. Just go. And Sofia. His tone softened. Be polite. The words didn't comfort me. I wiped my hands on a towel, straightened my uniform, and followed the quiet hallway toward the back of the restaurant. The sound of my heels on the marble floor echoed like gunfire in the stillness. When I reached the last door, I hesitated before knocking. Come in. The voice was low, even, and unmistakably his. I pushed the door open. The office was spacious but restrained, dark wood, shelves of Italian law books, and a single painting of Florence at dusk. Behind the desk sat Dante Ritchie, jacket gone, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. He looked up from a file as though he had been expecting me for hours. Close the door, please. I obeyed. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Sit. I perched on the edge, my pulse quickening. The room smelled faintly of cedar and expensive scotch. You handled the dinner well, he said. Not many people could walk into that room and stay composed. I didn't know what to say. Thank you, sir. He leaned back slightly. You speak Italian fluently. Yes. My grandmother raised me in Florence before I moved here with my mother. His gaze sharpened. And you still call her often? I froze. How? He tapped his desk lightly. You answered your phone during service. It wasn't hard to piece together. She's very ill, isn't she? My throat tightened. The nurse said, she doesn't have much time left. He nodded slowly, as though confirming something to himself. Then he reached into a drawer and placed a black leather folder on the desk, sliding it toward me. Open it. I hesitated, then lifted the cover. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to Florence, departing the next afternoon. Next to it lay an envelope thick with cash. I stared at it. I don't understand. He steepled his fingers. I have business in Italy meetings that require a translator who speaks both English and Italian fluently. You will accompany me for 2 weeks as my personal interpreter. The words barely registered. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity. I looked down at the ticket again. This says tomorrow. Yes. I can't just leave my apartment, my shifts. I've already spoken to Marco. Your position here will be held until you return. You've what? Consider it handled. His tone was calm, final. Why me? I asked quietly. He studied me for a moment, eyes unreadable. Because you're capable. And because you need to go home. I shook my head. You don't even know me. On the contrary. He opened a file drawer and withdrew a thin dossier, setting it beside the folder. My breath caught when I saw what was inside. My application form, references, even copies of my Italian birth certificate and my mother's U.S. citizenship papers. This is invasive, I whispered. This is due diligence, he replied. I don't travel with strangers. You had no right. His voice stayed low, steady. I make it my business to know the people I rely on. He leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the desk. You're an excellent employee. You've never been late more than twice. You send money overseas every month, $300, sometimes more, to pay for your grandmother's care. You rent a 1-bedroom in Queens under an assumed name. You avoid credit cards, social media, anything traceable. I felt my body go cold. How do you know all that? His expression didn't change. Because I had to be sure you could be trusted. That's not trust, I said quietly. That's surveillance. He didn't argue. I stared at the folder, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. And if I say no? Then you'll still take the ticket, he said, leaning back. Because you want to see your grandmother before she dies. The honesty in his tone left no space for pretense. My hands clenched. And if I say yes? Then you'll be compensated generously. $50,000 for 2 weeks' work, plus all expenses covered. I almost laughed. That's absurd. Is it? He asked softly. A linguist of your skill is worth that and more. I shook my head, struggling to think clearly. There's something you're not telling me. He smiled faintly. There are many things I'm not telling you, but you'll learn what you need to know when it's time. I should go. He didn't stop me, only added. A car will pick you up tomorrow at noon. Don't be late. I paused at the door, my hand trembling on the handle. You're very sure I'll agree? He took a slow sip of scotch. Your grandmother doesn't have much time, Sophia. Neither do you. The words hit like a physical blow, half promise, half warning. I stepped into the hallway, the sound of the door closing behind me too soft, too final outside. New York was asleep beneath a thin layer of snow. I stood beneath the streetlight, the envelope still in my hand, and watched my breath cloud in the cold. A black car was parked across the street. Its headlights flashed once, then went dark. I didn't sleep that night. I packed instead. My passport, few clothes, the photograph of my grandmother and me in Florence when I was a child, When dawn came, the ticket lay open on my nightstand. Flight 218 to Florence. Business class. Name Sophia Russo. It wasn't just a ticket. It was a summons, and I already knew I would go. Not only because of my grandmother, but because some invisible force, his voice, his gaze, his certainty had already begun pulling me toward a world I didn't understand, a world where no choice was truly mine. Sleep never came that night. I lay in the narrow bed of my Queen's apartment, the city's faint hum leaking through the window, my mind a whirlpool of fear, disbelief, and something darker, curiosity. By dawn, I'd already decided. I would go. I told myself it was for my grandmother. I told myself I could leave any time I wanted. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I packed methodically. Practical clothes for a business trip, a black dress for the funeral I was terrified to imagine, my passport, and the emergency cash I'd been saving hidden in a hollowed-out book since I left Boston at 11:30. I stood at the window watching the street below. My neighborhood wasn't the kind you wrote postcards about. Cracked pavement, flickering streetlights, a bodega that never closed. But it had been safe anonymity disguised as peace. Across the street, a man in a dark coat leaned against a lamppost, smoking. He'd been there since morning. Watching. At exactly noon, a sleek black Escalade pulled up to the curb. The man flicked away his cigarette, murmured something into an earpiece, and stepped aside as the car door opened. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The car is waiting, Miss Russo. For a moment I considered not going. I could lock the door, turn off the lights, pretend I wasn't home. But then I saw my grandmother's frail smile in my mind, the way she used to hum old Italian lullabies while stirring tomato sauce, and I knew I couldn't. I grabbed my suitcase, my purse, and the envelope of cash, then stepped out into the freezing January air. The driver was tall, broad-shouldered, his expression impassive behind dark sunglasses. Without a word, he took my suitcase, opened the back door, and waited. I slid into the car, half expecting Dante Ricci to be sitting inside. But the leather seat beside me was empty. As the Escalade pulled away, I asked softly, "Where is Mr. Ricci?" "Meeting you at the airport, Miss Russo," the driver replied, eyes flicking briefly to the rearview mirror. The city blurred past the tinted window, streets I'd walked 100 times, now foreign and distant. Across the river, the skyline gleamed under a pale sun, a final reminder of the life I was leaving behind. When we reached the airport, the car didn't stop at the main terminal. Instead, it turned down a side road, past a gate marked authorized personnel only. The guard took one look at the driver's ID and waved us through. We stopped in front of a small private terminal. No crowds, no lines, no announcements. Just quiet luxury. A woman waited by the glass doors, petite, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit. "Miss Russo," she greeted me with a practiced smile. "I'm Alessandra, Mr. Ricci's assistant. Please follow me." I followed her through polished corridors lined with abstract art and soft lighting. "Your luggage will be handled separately," she said. "Mr. Ricci is waiting in the private lounge." The words private lounge made something tighten in my chest. When the door opened, I saw him standing by a wall of glass overlooking the tarmac, hands clasped behind his back. Even from behind, his presence was undeniable, commanding, controlled. He turned as we entered. "Sophia," he said, my name rolling off his tongue as if it had always belonged there. "I'm pleased you decided to join me." I gripped my purse strap tighter. "I need to see my grandmother." Something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, maybe. Direct," he murmured. "I appreciate that." He gestured toward a seating area. "Please, sit. We have some time before boarding." Alessandra disappeared, leaving me alone with him. I sat on the edge of the leather sofa, while he poured 2 cups of coffee from a silver pot. He handed one to me. "Cappuccino. No sugar." I blinked. "How did you?" "I make it my business to know the people I travel with." I took a sip. It was perfect. I took the liberty of having some clothing sent ahead, he continued, watching me over the rim of his cup. Business attire appropriate for the meetings we'll attend. I brought clothes. I'm sure you did, he said, his tone calm but dismissive. These are simply additional options. Consider it part of your compensation. The way he said compensation made it sound less like generosity and more like control. When will I be able to see my grandmother? I asked. He set his cup down. We arrive in Florence tomorrow morning. You'll have the afternoon free to visit her. After that, I'll need you for a dinner meeting. I nodded, relief flooding through me. Thank you. Now, he said, leaning forward slightly, let's discuss expectations. For 20 minutes, he outlined my duties, translating during meetings with Italian business partners, accompanying him to dinners, reviewing correspondence. Nothing overtly inappropriate, yet the undertone was unmistakable. Every word reminded me that my life, my time, my presence was now measured by his schedule. Do you have any questions? He asked. 1,000. But I only said, why me? Really? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed another slim folder on the coffee table. Open it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the cover. Inside were documents. My college graduation photo, me smiling with my grandmother, my degree from Boston University in international business, and pages of records, addresses, bank statements, even a police report. The report from the night I'd fled Boston. My ex-boyfriend's name. The bruises on my wrists and throat. I felt the blood drain from my face. How did you get this? His voice was calm. I make it my business to know who works for me, Sophia. Even those who serve drinks in my restaurants. This goes beyond background checks. I snapped, anger finally breaking through fear. This is an invasion of privacy. Privacy is a luxury few can truly afford. He said it quietly, almost regretfully. He took the folder back, tucking it into his jacket. To answer your question, I chose you because you're qualified. You're desperate. And you have no connections that make you a security risk. I forced my voice steady. No connections? I have family. A dying grandmother. He cut in, his tone cool. No parents. Both deceased. No siblings. No serious relationship since Boston. Few friends in New York. You keep to yourself. You work hard. You try to be invisible. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. But you were never invisible to me. The words hit me like a shockwave. How long have you been watching me? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He stood. Our flight is ready. I followed him through another private corridor that led directly to the tarmac. A sleek black jet waited, its engines humming softly, a symbol of power disguised as elegance. The interior was all cream leather and polished wood, with only 8 seats and a lounge area that felt more like a penthouse than an airplane. 2 flight attendants greeted us with practiced smiles. Make yourself comfortable, Dante said, gesturing to a seat. It's a long flight. I sank into the buttery leather, feeling the walls close in. This was no ordinary trip. I wasn't just traveling with a man like Dante Ricci, I was stepping into his world. When we reached cruising altitude, a flight attendant appeared with champagne. I declined. Instead, I stared out the window, the city shrinking below until it was nothing but lights and memory. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear. I drifted into uneasy sleep, my mind replaying every word he'd said. Every look he'd given me. I woke to a light touch on my shoulder. Dante stood beside me. We're stopping to refuel. Stretch your legs if you'd like. I blinked, disoriented. Where are we? Iceland, he said simply, shrugging into a coat. There's a lounge inside. I followed him down the steps, my breath fogging in the cold. The airfield was small, isolated. The perfect place to disappear. Inside, He spoke quietly to his bodyguard and disappeared with Alessandra down a side hallway. For the first time since leaving New York, I was alone. I could run. But where would I go? My passport was still on the plane. My grandmother was waiting in Florence. Instead, I found the women's restroom, locked myself inside, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. "What have you done, Sophia?" I whispered. When I emerged, I found a small cafe and ordered tea, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Through the glass, I could see the jet being refueled, its sleek frame glowing under the floodlights. I didn't notice Dante until he slid into the seat across from me. "Feeling better?" he asked. I nodded stiffly. "Your grandmother's condition has stabilized slightly," he said, watching my face. "My people checked in with her facility. The doctor believes she'll hold on until we arrive." I stared at him. "You checked on her? It would be unfortunate if we arrived too late," he said simply. "I dislike wasted journeys." His words should have sounded cruel. Instead, they brought a strange relief. "Thank you," I murmured. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging without accepting the gratitude. "Come," he said, standing. "They've finished refueling." The rest of the flight blurred a haze of silence, luxury, and unspoken tension. When dawn broke, painting the horizon in gold, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Florence shortly." I looked out the window at the familiar landscape: olive groves, terracotta rooftops, the ribbon of the Arno River. For the first time in years, I was home. Dante turned to me, his voice low, unreadable. "Welcome to Florence, Sophia. Or should I say, welcome home?" I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. But as the wheels touched the runway, I realized something with terrifying clarity. I hadn't escaped into freedom. I'd boarded a flight into his power. The jet touched down on the runway just as the Tuscan dawn broke, soft light spilling over the rolling hills, the horizon painted with gold and lavender. Through the oval window, I could see cypress trees lining distant vineyards, and the faint outline of Florence in the distance. Didn't look real. It looked like a memory I had tried to forget. When we descended the steps, the warm air hit my face like a balm after the cold months in New York. For a moment, I simply stood there, breathing in the scent of olive trees and earth. Dante came down behind me, speaking in rapid Italian to a man waiting near the car. He looked completely at ease here, as if every stone in this country belonged to him. A black Maserati waited at the edge of the airstrip, polished to mirror brightness. "Andiamo," Dante said quietly, holding the car door open for me. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. I sat still as the car sped through winding country roads, the Tuscan landscape blurring into endless green and gold. Dante said nothing, and neither did I. Silence with him wasn't awkward. It was calculated. Every breath he took felt deliberate, every glance a choice. After nearly an hour, the car turned off the main road and onto a long gravel path flanked by ancient stone walls. The gates that appeared ahead were tall, wrought iron, and marked with a gold insignia, a stylized R. They opened silently as we approached. Beyond them, a villa rose like something out of another century. Pale stone ivy climbing its walls, shutters painted the color of sea glass. A fountain trickled in the center of a courtyard where marble statues glistened under the sun. "Welcome to Villa di Luz," Dante said. A line of staff waited near the steps: housekeepers, security, a cook in a white uniform, and an older woman with silver hair pinned neatly at her nape. She stood apart from the others, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. "Maria Questa Sofia. She'll be staying in the East Wing," Dante said. Maria's gaze flicked to me, assessing. "Benvenuta, signorina." Her tone was polite, but there was no warmth in it. She gestured for me to follow. Inside, the villa was breathtaking. Arched ceilings painted with frescoes, marble floors so polished they reflected the morning light, tall windows that opened to terraces overlooking the valley. Maria led me down a long corridor to a room that seemed carved from sunlight, cream-colored walls, an ornate canopy bed, a balcony framed by flowing curtains. "This will be your room," she said. "Mr. Ritchie asked that you rest before visiting your grandmother." I turned to her, startled. "He arranged the visit?" Maria hesitated for a moment before replying. "He arranges everything." When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, my suitcase untouched. The realization hit me in waves. He hadn't just brought me home. He had orchestrated every step, every contact, every arrangement, every movement I could possibly make. 2 hours later, there was a soft knock at the door. Dante stood there, his jacket gone, white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. "The car is ready," he said. "You'll see her now." The drive into Florence was quiet. The city unfolded like a dream, the Ponte Vecchio glinting in the sun, narrow cobblestone streets twisting between ochre buildings, the faint hum of street musicians near the river. My heart ached at the familiarity. When we arrived at the hospice, the air inside smelled of antiseptic and lavender. A nurse led us down a narrow corridor, her footsteps soft against the tile. My grandmother lay in a small sunlit room near the window. Her once dark hair was silver now, her skin pale as parchment, but her eyes, those warm, knowing eyes, still carried the same light they always had. "Sofia, amore mio," she whispered when she saw me. I rushed to her side, falling to my knees beside the bed. "Nonna, sono qui." "I'm here now." Her frail fingers brushed my cheek. "You came home." Tears blurred my vision. I couldn't stay away. From the doorway, Dante stood silently, hands clasped behind his back. His presence filled the room without a word. My grandmother's eyes flicked toward him. "Chi è quell'uomo?" I turned. "He's my employer." Dante stepped closer, his Italian fluid, flawless. "It's an honor to meet you, Signora Russo. Sofia speaks of you often." Her gaze lingered on him for a long time before she spoke again. "Men like you don't visit women like me without a reason." He inclined his head. "Perhaps I had more than one." She studied him, her eyes narrowing as though peering through time itself. "You have your father's eyes," she said softly. For the first time since I'd met him, Dante's composure cracked just slightly. "You knew my father?" "I knew of him," she murmured. "Men like him always leave echoes." A silence followed, heavy and intimate, before she turned back to me. "Be careful, Bella mia. Men who live in shadows can make you forget the light." I tried to smile through the lump in my throat. "I'll be fine, Nonna." She smiled faintly. "You always say that." Dante stepped closer. "I've arranged for a doctor from Switzerland to visit her tomorrow. He's the best in his field. She'll receive every possible treatment." I turned to him, stunned. "Why would you do that?" His answer was quiet but firm. "Because you work for me now. And I take care of what's mine." The words sent a shiver through me, equal parts gratitude and unease. We stayed until sunset, talking softly while the light turned gold against the walls. When the nurse came to adjust my grandmother's oxygen, I kissed her hand, promising to return tomorrow. Outside, the city glowed under the dying sun. The drive back to the villa was silent again, but the air felt different, charged, alive with something I couldn't name. "You don't owe me anything," I said suddenly, my voice breaking the quiet. He turned his head slightly. "I disagree." When we arrived, the villa stood bathed in twilight. Maria was waiting at the top of the steps, her expression unreadable. As Dante walked ahead, she leaned closer to me and whispered in Italian, her voice barely above a breath. "Men like that take what they want. Remember that." Her words clung to me long after I entered my room. That night I stood on the balcony, the stars scattering over the Tuscan sky like spilled diamonds. Down below by the fountain, Dante stood with his phone pressed to his ear, his expression unreadable. He didn't look up, Yet somehow I felt his awareness like a thread connecting us across the darkness. For the first time, I realized how fragile my freedom truly was, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear and confusion, something dangerous began to take root, an awareness I couldn't resist. Because no matter how much I wanted to deny it, I knew. The moment I walked into that private dining room in New York, my life had stopped belonging to me. It now belonged to him. The following evening, Maria appeared at my door without knocking, carrying a long garment bag over one arm. She set it carefully on the bed and pulled back the zipper to reveal a dress, black silk, floor-length, sleeveless, elegant in a way that made me hesitate to touch it. "Mr. Ritchie asked that you wear this tonight," she said. I blinked. "Tonight? For dinner," Maria replied. "He's hosting guests. Important ones." My heart thudded. "And he wants me there?" Her eyes met mine briefly. "He always gets what he wants." She helped me into the dress without another word. The fabric was cool against my skin, the cut flawless, fitted but not revealing, the neckline modest but designed to draw the eye. When she fastened a delicate diamond pendant around my neck, I flinched. "I can't wear this. You already are." Her tone carried no malice, just resignation. When she stepped back, she studied me with quiet calculation. "You look like someone who belongs here," she said softly. Then, more to herself, "even if you don't yet understand the cost." Before I could respond, she opened the door. "They're waiting." The dining room of Villa de Luz had been transformed. Candlelight shimmered off crystal glasses and polished silver. The scent of roasted pheasant and aged wine hung thick in the air. The long table gleamed beneath a chandelier that scattered fragments of gold across the walls. Dante stood near the fireplace, speaking quietly with 3 men and 1 woman, all elegantly dressed, their posture and ease suggesting wealth and danger. When he saw me, conversation stopped. His gaze moved over me slowly, deliberately, taking in every detail before meeting my eyes. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Russo. She'll be assisting me tonight." A murmur of polite greetings followed. The older man to Dante's left, stocky, with slicked gray hair and a heavy gold ring, smiled too broadly.
Che bella sorpresa, Isaid.
"Your taste in translators improves every year." The woman beside him laughed lightly. Dante didn't. He simply turned toward me, his expression unreadable. "Miss Russo, please take your seat." I sat at the far end of the table, near the window. Dante occupied the center, commanding the room without raising his voice. Dinner began with small talk, wine, art, the weather in Milan, but underneath every word, tension pulsed like a hidden wire. They weren't friends. They were predators, circling each other with smiles and knives behind their backs. Halfway through the meal, conversation shifted. "The Livorno warehouse will be operational by month's end," said the gray-haired man, Ferrero. I remembered Maria whispering his name earlier. "But we'll need to ensure our shipments remain unseen. Everything passes through the proper channels," Dante said evenly. Ferrero chuckled, swirling his wine. "Proper channels flood easily when the police start sniffing around. We'll need a tighter arrangement." The others laughed quietly. Dante didn't. He reached for his glass, tapping the rim once. The subtle sound was enough to silence them all. His voice dropped, calm but edged. "No one uses my routes for anything I don't authorize." Ferrero's smile faltered. "Of course. I was merely suggesting. Suggestions," Dante interrupted softly, "can be dangerous things, Mr. Ferrero." The air in the room thickened. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Dante leaned back, the faintest smile playing on his lips. "Eat. Drink. It's a beautiful night." The tension dissipated, but not completely. As the servants cleared plates and poured new wine, I caught Ferrero's glance, hard, calculating, a flicker of something like hate. I lowered my eyes to my notebook, pretending to take notes on the translation. Dante's voice was smooth, deliberate. Every word was a move in a game I didn't yet understand. Then, without warning, his gaze flicked toward me. Just once. A subtle signal. I froze. Ferrero had just mentioned a name I recognized from a corruption article in La Repubblica. He said it too casually, too often. Dante had noticed. So had I. When our eyes met again, Dante's expression didn't change, but something passed between us. Understanding. A silent exchange in a room full of noise. Dessert came and went. The guests laughed, drank, and complimented the vintage wine. But beneath the civility, power shifted like a current under ice. When Ferrero raised his glass, he said, "To trust." Dante lifted his own, his tone smooth as silk. "To loyalty." Their glasses touched. Crystal chimed softly, sharp as a blade. After the last guest departed, the house fell into silence again. The fire in the hearth was dying when Dante turned to me. "You noticed, didn't you?" I hesitated. The name he mentioned. It wasn't part of the legitimate shipments. His mouth curved slightly, not a smile, not quite approval, but something close. "Good. I wanted to see if you would. Why let him talk at all?" I asked. He stepped closer, his voice quiet. "Because sometimes the smartest trap is the one the prey builds himself." His gaze lingered on me for a beat too long. "You did well tonight, Sophia. Perfect, actually." I looked away. It was nothing. His hand lifted, almost unconsciously, and brushed a loose strand of hair from my shoulder. The gesture was intimate, too intimate, and yet I didn't move. "Don't diminish what you did," he said softly. "You read a room better than most men. I pay millions to advise me." My breath caught. "You shouldn't. Tell me to stop." The words came out low, raw, a command wrapped in invitation. But I didn't. He kissed me not with impatience, but with precision. Controlled, inevitable. The world tilted, time holding its breath. When he pulled away, his voice was rougher, almost human. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "Forgive me." The apology didn't erase the truth pulsing between us. A line had been crossed cleanly, irrevocably. He turned away, reaching for a glass of wine left on the table. "Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow will be complicated." I stood there, frozen, watching the fire's glow fade to embers. My reflection shimmered faintly in the window, bare shoulders, the diamond pendant, the marks of a woman both chosen and trapped. The pearls, the wine, the silence, they no longer felt like symbols of elegance. They felt like chains, and though I told myself it meant nothing, a part of me already knew. The game had changed, and I had just played my first move. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of my room, golden and warm, but I didn't feel it. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flicker of candlelight on Dante's face, felt the ghost of his hand against my skin, heard his voice whisper, "Tell me to stop." I pressed my fingers to my lips and told myself it meant nothing. A moment. A mistake. But deep inside, I knew better. When I came downstairs, Maria was waiting in the hallway with a tray of coffee and fresh bread. Her expression was unreadable. "He's in the study," she said. "He asked for you." I followed the echo of my own footsteps down the long corridor to the heavy double doors. I hesitated, then knocked. "Come in." His voice was calm, even like the night before had never happened. He sat behind the desk, reading a stack of documents. The sunlight through the tall windows cast his features in clean, sharp lines. Control made flesh. "Sit," he said, without looking up. I obeyed. My pulse quicked. He set the papers aside. "We have a problem, Sophia." The sound of my name from his mouth did strange things to me. I forced myself to focus. "What kind of problem?" "Ferrero." I frowned. "From last night." He nodded. "He made a call to Milan an hour ago. He's trying to move shipments through Livorno using my name." My stomach tightened. "He's defying you?" "He's making a mistake," Dante said quietly. And mistakes have consequences. The silence that followed was cold and absolute. I tried to steady my breathing. What do you need me to do? He studied me, that same calculating look in his eyes. Translate some documents. Contracts, permits, things we'll need for our meeting tomorrow in Rome. We'll discuss it with the board. I nodded quickly. Of course. But as he handed me the first folder, a photograph slipped out, an image of a shipping container, open, revealing crates lined in dark steel. I froze. He noticed. They're antiques, he said evenly, retrieving the photo. His tone was too smooth that I met his gaze. Are they? For a moment, neither of us looked away. Then he smiled, slightly cold, amused. Curiosity can be dangerous, Sophia. I swallowed hard. So can lies. His eyes darkened, but he didn't reply. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the courtyard below. You think I'm a criminal, he said finally. I think you're a man who doesn't answer questions, I replied before I could stop myself. That earned a faint laugh. Fair. He turned back toward me. But there's a difference between a criminal and a businessman who understands power. Power, I repeated softly. Is that what last night was about? He froze for a fraction of a second, just enough for me to see it. Then his expression returned to its perfect mask. Last night was a mistake, he said. It won't happen again. The word stung, sharper than I expected. I nodded, pretending not to care. Of course. Good, he said, returning to the desk. Because I need you focused. There's more at stake here than you understand. I leaned forward. Then help me understand. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out another file, thicker, heavier. Everything I built here, my restaurants, my holdings, even this villa, is legitimate. But men like Ferrero see opportunity in my name. They think power means freedom. They're wrong. I hesitated. And what does it mean to you? Responsibility, he said simply. Control. He looked at me again, and something flickered behind the calm. Exhaustion, maybe, or pain. My father taught me that when a man loses control, he loses everything. I thought of my own past, the screaming, the bruises, the fear of not knowing what came next. Then maybe your father was wrong, I said quietly. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he said nothing. A knock on the door broke the silence. Alessandra entered, her expression crisp. The car is ready, sir. For the inspection. He nodded. I'll be there in 5 minutes. When she left, he turned back to me. Stay inside the villa today. There are things happening you don't need to see. That's not fair, I said before I could stop myself. You brought me here, and now you expect me to sit in a gilded cage? He studied me for a long moment. A cage can be protection too. Protection from what? His eyes held mine. From the truth. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he was already walking past me toward the door. Dante, I said softly. It was the first time I'd used his name aloud. He paused, one hand on the doorframe. Last night, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Was it really a mistake? He didn't turn, but his voice came low and rough. If it wasn't, I'd have to keep you. And that would destroy us both. Then he was gone. The hours crawled by. I worked through the documents, translating until the lines blurred before my eyes. Outside, I could hear the hum of engines, the faint echo of distant voices. But no one came to check on me. Late in the afternoon, Maria appeared with a tray of tea. Her gaze lingered on me. You look tired. I'm fine, I said. She sighed, setting down the tray. He told me to keep you busy. Said you shouldn't wander. Why? She hesitated. Because not every man who works for him is loyal. I frowned. What are you saying? She looked toward the door, lowering her voice. There are men outside the gates. Police may be worse. They've been watching the villa since last night. A chill ran through me. And Dante knows, she said simply. He always knows. When she left, I went to the balcony. The sun was setting, and across the long gravel drive, 2 black cars were parked near the gate. Men stood beside them, smoking, pretending not to look. Fear curled in my stomach. I stepped back into the room and froze. A figure was standing in the doorway. It was Dante. He looked different, his tie loosened, his shirt faintly rumpled, a faint shadow of fatigue under his eyes. "Why are you spying from the balcony?" he asked quietly. "I wasn't. Maria said there were men outside." "There are always men outside." His tone was soft but edged. "You can't hide from danger by staring at it." He stepped closer, until only a breath separated us. "You shouldn't be afraid of them, Sophia." "Then what should I be afraid of?" I whispered. He held my gaze. "Me." The truth of it landed like thunder, terrifying and undeniable. He took a step back, regaining control. "Tomorrow we go to Rome. We'll settle things with Ferrero and the board. You'll translate. And then," his voice lowered, "you'll decide if you want to stay in my world or run from it." "I already know the answer," I said quietly. He studied me, and for a moment, the mask cracked just enough for me to see the man beneath the legend. "Then God help you, Sophia." He turned and left, leaving the door open behind him. Outside, the last light of day died over the hills, and the villa sank into shadow, and for the first time I understood. The truth he had warned me about wasn't out there. It was him. Morning arrived wrapped in silence. The villa was still. Almost too still, its calm more suffocating than peaceful. Outside my window, mist clung to the cypress trees like smoke. The air smelled of rain and tension. I dressed in the clothes Maria had laid out. A tailored gray dress, conservative but elegant. She pinned my hair back with quiet precision, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "You'll need to be careful today," she murmured. "Rome is not Florence. The people you'll meet, they smile, but their knives are sharp." I met her gaze in the mirror. "Is that a warning?" "It's advice," she said simply, fastening a small silver brooch at my collar. "For someone who hasn't yet learned the difference between danger and destiny." Before I could ask what she meant, there was a knock at the door. Alessandra stood there, composed as ever. "We leave in 10 minutes. The car ride to the private airfield was wordless. Dante sat beside me. His posture relaxed, but his silence waited. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint whisper of rain against the windows. When the plane lifted off, the sky over Tuscany was gray and heavy. I stared out the window, trying to calm the rhythm of my heartbeat, but every part of me was aware of him, his nearness, his stillness, his power. Halfway through the flight, he finally spoke. "Ferrero has overreached," he said. "He thinks he's clever. He isn't. Today I'll make that clear." I turned toward him. "And what do you need me to do?" "Translate. Listen. Remember." His tone was quiet but precise. "You'll stay beside me at all times. If someone addresses you directly, speak only when I nod." I nodded. "And if things go wrong?" He glanced at me, a shadow of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "They won't." "Because you planned everything?" "Because I planned everyone." The words sent a chill through me. The meeting took place in an old palazzo on the outskirts of Rome, its marble facade cracked but still magnificent. The air smelled faintly of incense and rain. Inside, the halls were lined with oil paintings of men who had worn power like armor. We were led into a private room, long table, red velvet curtains, a crystal chandelier casting fractured light across polished wood. Ferrero was already there, flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. He smiled when he saw Dante. "Ah, il nostro Giovanni Imperator," he said, spreading his hands. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your appetite for business." Dante returned the smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I prefer to conduct business with men who honor their word." Ferrero chuckled, settling back in his chair. And yet here we are still partners. Dante's tone remained calm. That depends on how you define partnership. The air between them thickened, heavy with old debts and invisible lines of power. I sat beside Dante, hands folded on my lap, pretending not to hear every threat hidden beneath their words. The meeting began. Ferrero spoke first, presenting documents about shipping routes, customs clearances, new opportunities in Eastern Europe. His Italian was polished, his charm rehearsed. Dante listened in silence. Every few minutes he'd glance at me, a subtle cue to translate a sentence or clarify a point. I did so quietly, careful not to show the fear creeping up my spine. Then Ferrero slid a file across the table. "This," he said, "is the proposal for Livorno, the expanded line. All legitimate, of course." I caught a flicker in Dante's eyes. He opened the file, scanning it slowly. Inside were export permits, manifests, numbers clean on the surface, but wrong. I knew enough Italian bureaucracy to recognize falsified stamps. Dante's voice was soft when he spoke. "You insult me, Ferrero." Ferrero laughed lightly. "Come now, Dante. Don't be so dramatic." Dante closed the file, folding his hands on top of it. "You tried to use my name to move weapons through my ports." The room went silent. Ferrero's expression shifted, just slightly. "You make it sound worse than it is." "It is worse," Dante said. His tone didn't rise, but the temperature in the room dropped. "You put my entire network at risk. You put me at risk." Ferrero leaned back, smirking. "We're all at risk, my friend. That's the business." Dante's hand moved slightly, a gesture so small most would miss it. But I didn't. From the corner of the room, one of Dante's men, silent until now, stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, Ferrero, his men, and the very crates I'd seen in that picture back at the villa. Ferrero's face drained of color. Dante rose slowly from his chair. "Do you know what happens to men who try to use my name?" Ferrero forced a laugh, but his voice trembled. "You wouldn't. I already have." At that moment the double doors opened. Two of Dante's guards entered, each carrying a folder stamped with the crest of the Italian financial police. They handed them to the officers waiting discreetly in the hallway. It was over. The trap had been set long before the meeting even began. Ferrero hadn't just walked into it, he'd built it himself, exactly as Dante had planned. Ferrero stood, panic flaring in his eyes. You set me up." "No," Dante said quietly. "You set yourself up. I simply watched." As the guards led Ferrero and his men away, the room emptied. The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to Dante. "You knew this would happen." "Of course," he said simply. "You called the police?" "I called everyone," he corrected. "You can't win a war if you don't know who's fighting it." I stared at him. So this was never about business. He looked at me then. Really looked, his expression unreadable. "Everything is about business. Even loyalty." We left the palazzo just as the rain began to fall, soft and relentless. The air smelled of wet stone and endings. I in the car. Silence hung between us until I finally spoke. "You destroyed him." I removed a threat. "You used me," I said quietly. He turned toward me, eyes dark, dangerous. "You think I needed you to trap Ferrero? Didn't you?" A pause. Then softer. "No, but I wanted you there to see it." "To see what?" "What I am." He looked away, the faint reflection of rain streaking across the window. "So you'd stop pretending I could ever be something else." I felt a lump form in my throat. And what if I already knew? His gaze met mine again, sharp and endless. "Then you're already in deeper than you think." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we reached the villa, the rain had turned to mist, soft and ghostly over the stone courtyard. He opened my door but didn't move aside. "You'll stay here tonight?" he said. No calls. No wandering. I stepped out, brushing past him. Are you afraid I'll run? His reply was almost a whisper. No. I'm afraid you won't. As I walked toward the villa, the wind carried his words after me, faint but unshakable inside. Maria waited at the top of the stairs, her face pale. It's done then, she said quietly. I nodded. She glanced toward the courtyard where Dante still stood in the rain, motionless, watching the world like a man who had conquered it and found no joy in the victory. Be careful, figlia mia, she said. The most dangerous traps are not the ones he sets for others. They're the ones he doesn't know he's set for himself. That night, lying awake in the vast, silent villa, I realized she was right. Because no matter what Dante believed, the trap wasn't just his. It was mine too. And I had already stepped into it willingly. The rain had not stopped by morning. It fell in thin silver sheets across the hills of Tuscany, soft and relentless, washing the night away but leaving the weight of what had happened untouched. From my window, I could see Dante standing near the fountain, his coat darkened by rain, unmoving like a statue carved from shadow. Even soaked, he looked composed, untouchable, and yet there was something in the curve of his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Exhaustion. Or regret. Downstairs, Maria poured coffee in the kitchen without a word. The aroma filled the silence between us. When I took the cup, she looked up briefly. He didn't sleep, she said. I know. You should talk to him. I hesitated. Would it make a difference? Her eyes softened. Perhaps not for him. But for you. The courtyard stones were slick beneath my shoes as I crossed to him. He didn't turn, but I knew he had heard me. You should come inside, I said quietly. You'll catch a cold. I've had worse, he murmured, eyes fixed on the horizon. For a moment neither of us spoke. The air smelled of wet earth and the faint trace of cypress. Ferrero? I asked. Gone, he said. His assets seized. His men scattered. And you? He finally turned to me. I remain. The simplicity of it hurt more than any confession could have. I stepped closer. You won. Isn't that what you wanted? He gave a short, humorless laugh. Victory is overrated. It never feels like it should. You built this world, Dante, I said softly. Maybe it's time to walk away from it. He met my eyes, and for a moment I saw something raw flicker there, fear, maybe, or longing. You think a man like me can just walk away? Yes, I said, surprising myself. If he remembers why he started walking in the first place. He looked at me for a long time. The rain traced silent lines down his face. You're the only one who's ever spoken to me like that. Maybe that's why you keep me here. He shook his head slowly. No, Sophia. That's why I should let you go. My breath caught. You don't mean that. I do, he said, his voice low. You came here for your grandmother. She's improving. The doctor said she'll make it through the summer. You've done what you needed to do. And what about what you needed? I asked. He exhaled, the sound rougher than I'd ever heard it. I needed someone to remind me I still had a soul. You did that. Now leave before I ruin it. I wanted to argue to stay, but I knew it would only make the goodbye harder. So I said the only thing I could. Thank you for everything. He nodded once. A car will take you to Florence this afternoon. There's an account in your name. Enough to start over anywhere you wish. I don't want your money. It isn't a gift, he said. It's an apology. That afternoon the villa felt hollow. Alessandra avoided my eyes as she helped pack my things. Maria hugged me tightly at the door, whispering, Be free, figlia mia. The car ride to Florence was quiet. The landscape passed in a blur of color and memory: olive trees, terracotta roofs, the soft bend of the Arno River. My heart felt both lighter and heavier than it had in years. When we arrived at the hospice, my grandmother was sitting up in bed, sunlight spilling across her blankets. Her eyes lit when she saw me. Amore mio, sei tornata. I smiled through the ache. I'm here, Nona. She studied my face. You've seen something that changed you. I laughed softly. Maybe I've just remembered who I am. She reached for my hand. Then promise me one thing, don't let the darkness follow you. I promise. We talked for hours. About home. About the past. About forgiveness, both the giving and the asking. When she drifted to sleep, I kissed her forehead and whispered, Ti amo. 2 days later, I stood on the terrace of a small Florence apartment, watching the sun set over the city. Bells tolled from distant churches. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. For the first time in years, I felt stilled at my phone buzzed. No name, just a number I already knew. A message appeared. You once asked what power means to me. I think I'm beginning to understand that it means knowing when to let someone go. Dear, I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I typed back one line. And sometimes power means finding the courage to come back. No reply came, but when I looked up, I could almost imagine him there in some distant corner of Italy, watching the same sunset, carrying the same ache. The past would always live in both of us. The danger, the desire, the pull neither of us had wanted. But somewhere beneath all that shadow, something had shifted. He had freed me. And in a way, I had freed him. I turned toward the light spilling through the window, breathing in deeply for the first time in forever. It didn't hurt to hope because endings, I realized, were just beginnings in disguise, and mine had finally begun. As the final scene fades, the rain-soaked villa, the echo of his voice, the quiet strength in her eyes, a soft female narrator whispers, if you believe that one look can ignite a storm, that love and danger sometimes share the same heartbeat, make sure to subscribe. It's free and it helps us bring you more stories where passion meets power, and fate is never what it seems. Because in every shadow there's a choice. In every ending, a beginning. Subscribe now to Desire Tales, where every heartbeat tells a story.